Ladies and gentlemen, I just recorded an awesome interview with Charles Frawnie. We talked about this book, The Rise, or The Occult Among Us, excuse me, not The Rise of the Occult, that's his other book. Great stuff. I made a mistake in the beginning. I had my wrong microphone selected, so you didn't hear this nice radio timbre that I've worked very hard to cultivate with all my sound processing software and things I got here in hardware. So I apologize for that slight little problem. And I forgot to mention during the show that I am doing a series right now on my Substack, meretradition.substack.com. And if you go to my website, which I'll just show you here, meretradition.substack.com, I'm doing a series on They Have Uncrowned Him. We're going through this book by Archbishop Lefebvre. And it's basically a sort of a series of lectures and classes through the errors of liberalism, which I think is fascinating given all of the talk about politics and the Republican National Convention, all those kinds of things. So check that out. But most importantly, check out Charles's books that we're going to talk about in the show, which you're going to see right now. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with my friend Charles Frawnie. Now, Charles, your last name is spelled F-R-A-U-N-E, and you pronounce it Frawnie, but it looks like frown. So we're bringing on Charles to turn that frown upside down. How's that for a dad joke?
That's a good one. Classic.
Okay, good. You probably never heard that before. So Charles is the author of several books. The most recent is called The Occult Among Us, and I will actually bring that up on my screen here. And here is the audiobook, which we'll play a sample of that later. But I'll show you where you can find it on... Oh, that's his old book, sorry. This is his new book, and you can see this here. The Occult Among Us, Exorcists and Former Occultists Expose the Nature of this Modern Evil. And the book is heavily endorsed by some of the most prominent names in the church today, including Bishop Strickland, I believe Bishop Schneider, and in any event, it's a very good book going through the dangers of the occult, which is also real. And Charles has a unique vocation, a unique calling in life, where he's dedicated himself to these matters of spiritual warfare and the dark forces. And he does a lot of good work. So we're very happy to have you on. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you, Kennedy. I appreciate coming on the show.
So this is a follow-up to The Rise of the Occult, which I narrated, and people can find that on Audible. Excuse me. And by the way, the links for all this stuff, for Charles' stuff, will be in the description area to this podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on iTunes, Spotify, etc. And the first book in this series, The Rise of the Occult, it's essentially sort of the testimonies of people who have got out, right? That's the crux of the book. It's a lot of research and interviews you transcribed and put into a narrative format. It was very well done. And this one is about how the occult manifests itself among us and even in the church. So perhaps you could just give us a general overview of why people ought to read this book.
Yeah, so as I think one of the three endorsements, as you were highlighting, is from the exorcist in D.C., Monsignor Rossetti. And in his endorsement, he pointed out why people should read this book. And he focused on parents, and not just parents, anybody, priests, bishops. Let me see if I can find, he said, if I were a parent, I would have my children read this before they might be tempted to dabble in the occult, lest they do so thinking it to be harmless. The occult is springing up everywhere, and this book exposes its many faces, sometimes obvious, but other times hidden. So this book, as you were saying, The Rise of the Occult has a narrative structure, which I think is very appealing. It's longer, it's like 350 pages. But there was so much to tell, but to follow these 16 former occultists and all these exorcists who were commenting as well, and other people I interviewed. And it laid out the whole story, the whole event of what happens to you when you go into the occult and then try to get out. And a lot of topics are covered, some of them glossed over along the way in that book. So then I go back and I focus on a lot of specific topics in The Occult Among Us, and just topic by topic by topic. So for this book, you can really jump around. And the other book you could too, but this one is designed for you to just look at the table of contents like, oh, abortion, what's that all about? Oh, the modern satanic movement, let me look into that. Or Wicca and witchcraft, with the Ouija board, Reiki. So I've broken it all up into topics. People can jump in, and it's just like the way I'd like to write it. There's no fluff. So some of the chapters are shorter than others, but it gets right to the point, and it gives you a lot to think about and reflect on. It's a good manual, guidebook, reference book. One of them somebody referred to these books as a catechesis on the occult.
Mm.
So kind of a good way to look at it.
Very good. And I just realized I had the wrong microphone picked. This sounds much better. So that's annoying.
Yeah.
I'll make sure I'll record a sort of intro thing that I'll edit after saying, bear with that's not a very good advertisement for me as an audiobook narrator, is it, Charles, that I have my silly MacBook Air microphone and not this nice, expensive setup and so forth. So we're back with with the voice you're used to, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, honestly, Charles, my oldest son will be turning 9 in October. I almost forgot. We have 6 kids, 8 years old and under at the moment. So sometimes I forget what day of the week it is, as much as I often forget their names. And so he has no concept of any of this stuff. But eventually, because we homeschool and all that, but eventually, he's going to have to do something, whether it's, we'll probably send him to a good traditional Catholic boarding school. But even there, people come from different families. You think everyone has the same values, but parents have different rules about what TV they're allowed to watch at home and different video games and things like that. You can't. So you do have to, at a certain point, you have to prepare your kids. So I'll probably have him look into this book when he's, 12, 13, 14 or something like that, going off to boarding school, because he has to be aware of just the great disorder. So I want to get into some of the topics in this book, and we talked a little bit on text before this. So the first about 3 or 4 chapters, really, well, actually 6 or so, you do a lot on witches and witchcraft and Wicca. So I think a lot of people are under the impression that basically, Wicca is witches. It's kind of like synonyms, but they're technically different things, or they've been used in different ways historically. Could you give us just a basic overview of what witchcraft is versus Wicca? Is it kind of like Aristotle, where all men are mortals, but not all mortals are men? All Wiccans are kind of like witches, but not all witches are Wiccans. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, it got really confusing, which is why I had to dedicate some time to distinguish it. And as one of the people, I didn't interview her. She's an online witch. She's an active witch. I listened to a lot of her videos, and she made the point repeatedly that people get these confused, witches and Wiccans. Wiccans tend to bind themselves to kind of a certain creedal, very vague creedal system, like the Wiccan Rede, the Law of Three, and something else. But witches are really just free-spirited. They can do whatever they want. But witchcraft can be added to your practice. So Wiccans can be witches as well. And originally, Wicca was a religion for witches. So the distinctions were really like almost arbitrary. Witches will say that they have more autonomy because they don't bind themselves. Like a Wiccan may say to a witch, well, you got to follow the Wiccan Rede. And the witch is like, wait, no, I don't follow Wiccan anything. And you don't need to as well. So I think that's one of the big things that are certain, very minor. And one big point I have in the book is people can lay these off to the side. No Wiccan is bound to follow any moral principle, but they seem to kind of bind themselves just to take the label of Wiccan upon themselves. They bind themselves to the Wiccan Rede, which is, basically do no harm. And the Law of Three is that whatever you do will come back to you threefold. So do good, otherwise threefold evil will come back to you. But the witches don't have to follow these things. But then, as you were saying, you can mix them up. You can be both, and you can blur the lines. And it's man-made. It's invented. So it doesn't really have a real solid distinction.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Wiccans a lot of the time are big on sort of the forces of nature. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, and this is one of the points about energy. The idea of energy is ubiquitous in the occult, and they think energy resides in nature, and they kind of summon it or channel it or embody it. Not really embody it, but they work with energies within nature. Often Wiccans are portrayed as nature-loving, very earthbound.
It's funny, talking about how widespread these occult things, and perhaps we should just loosely define occult means hidden. So, basically these paganish or syncretist, non-Catholic, religious, Gnostic philosophies that people fall into that are, they have a dark hand behind them, obviously. I was watching or listening the other day, as people can see in my background here, I've got all this weightlifting equipment. I'm a little bit of a gym rat. And I was listening to an interview
with the former Mr. Olympia, Dorian Yates. For lifting fans, bodybuilding is a terrible sport, and I don't follow the sport, but the practitioners know what they're doing. So if you're looking for tips, they know what they're talking about. Obviously, it's kind of what they do. And I was listening to this. He was like 6-time Mr. Olympia, and he's an Englishman who was in prison. He's like one of those guys from like a Guy Ritchie film. He doesn't come off as the kind of guy who'd be into funny, girly, whatever stuff. But he's, retired now. He's in his 60s. He was famous in the 90s. And he just kind of says, offhand, just makes a remark that people make all the time. And I'm like, that's an occult reference. And he says, well, it's the universe. You put the negativity out there and it comes back to you. And just kind of says it in passing. And I'm thinking, my goodness gracious, you're like naturally speaking, you're like a man's man. And you're just throwing around these stupid, yoga ashram, suburb occult things as if you're, some lady who's whatever, going to Starbucks, getting her special tea and then going to her palm reading. Like, it just shows how deep it is. So, I mean, maybe you can comment on this, but I mean, these terms are so widespread. They're literally everywhere.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a devout Catholic, my father, big family, and he used the expression, he knows what I do. He knows the work I'm in. And he used the expression, well, I guess that wasn't in the cards. And he caught himself like, wait a second, that's like a tarot card reference. What did I just say? But it's always there. Like, I've been very attentive, maybe that's why I'm a writer, for like decades, about my thoughts and my words, the grammar, like I'm a grammar Nazi. So especially after writing this book, I've become so focused on purifying my language, purifying the subtle nuances of language. I don't like expressions, for example. I don't use expressions because I'm like, well, what does that mean? I don't want to use words that I don't understand the meaning to. But a lot of people don't, and that they just soak up, like children. We soak up language. We soak up the language of the culture. And if the culture uses a language which is evil, and you are not really hypervigilant about what we're thinking, what we're saying, what we're parroting back, we're going to pick up occultic language because it's everywhere. Because the belief of God has been just scrubbed, especially from, you're in Canada, I'm in the United States. I think it's probably very similar, though. The belief in God has been scrubbed from the common landscape of mankind, of our existence now. And a lot of us struggle, even devout Catholics struggle with being raised secular. And like, we have to rebuild this internal faith structure. And it's really irritating when it's like hard to pray, hard to think about God, because we're just hardwired to be secularized. But that's a grave wound, a big opening right there for the occult to spread, because the occult presents a religion to people without a religion, people who are craving a religion. The occult's like, I'll give you a religion and I'm going to work my way in. And like, so in one of the books I said the devil is evangelizing the world right now through the occult, and that is a good way to look at it.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And it's, speaking of expressions, like the expression "knock on wood." I've heard, maybe the origin of this. I heard that one exorcist. What's his name? It's not Ripperger. It's not Amorth. One of the famous one. He's kind of bald, and he's been on like a lot of talks or whatever. I'm forgetting. Anyway,
I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, but he said that the origin of knock on wood was a druid thing, druidical, not juridical. But I also heard it was an old Christian expression where it was like, touch the wood of the cross. Do you have any insight into that? That's kind of off topic, but I've always wondered.
No, and I think it's relevant too, because it touches on sacramentals, on God's desire to interact with us through created things. And a long time ago, I just wrote it off as superstitious. And then someone called me out and said, no, it has something to do with the cross. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Still seems superstitious, way before I did all this research, like 10, 15 years ago. And then I read a book on like why we do things as Catholics. And it was in that book, like you said, it's a reference to the cross. Like, by touching the cross, we knock on wood. If you don't have the cross in your mind when you say it, though, it would be superstitious. Just like if you use a sacramental that has been blessed in a superstitious way, or you think, if I wear the scapular, it doesn't matter if I sin, Our Lady's going to protect me, I'm not going to go to hell, and you just sin freely. Well, you're treating the scapular as a superstition. So I think if you have in your mind, knock on wood, as I'm placing my hand on the cross, so God will protect me in this. Well, then it becomes a devotional act. So with the origin, I think that is the origin from what I've learned, but we could look into the Druid thing.
Yeah, it could be. But, I'm glad you brought up the sacramental thing. There is Father William Most was a very good theologian. And he, I think he lived until the 90s or something, but he was very traditional. Like, he was largely active before the council, and he kind of kept that theology after. And he was actually a great Latin scholar. He wrote Latin handbooks. It was called Learning Latin Through the Natural Method or something like that. I have one. It's pretty good. And he wrote about the scapular, and he was very insightful, and he basically said the thing about the scapular is that it doesn't have a magical power in and of itself. Obviously, priests can bless things, and they have a sacramental power, and there are different intentions behind particular blessings. But he says it's a garment of faith, so you wear the scapular as a sign of your devotion. And what it is it's sort of a reminder every time you see it, and you feel like I have one on right now, and you see it and you feel it and so forth, and you touch it, you take it off before you go in the shower, you put it back on. It's this constant reminder that that you're committed to being under the mantle of Our Lady, and we are human beings who need the physical things. So even that simple act of, people will say, "Oh, I never take mine off, even if I go in the shower." It's like, well, that's a good way to ruin your scapular, but it's also missing the point. You're not the promises of the scapular. You won't die without your scapular and so forth. We're reasonable as Catholics. You could slip and fall in your bathtub and crack your neck if you're not wearing your scapular, but the scapular is not going to stop you from slipping and falling. The point is that the devotion to the promises of the rosary and the scapular itself are the act of faith in your soul that is going to make it so that you don't die in a state of mortal sin because of your devotion to it. But it's not the cloth itself. That's an important distinction people have to make.
Mm-hmm. And in the faith, I'm doing a lot of research on sacramentals. Faith is key for sacramentals to function. If we don't use them with devotion, with piety, with faith, then they don't work. We actually can turn them into superstitions, kind of like That's you're saying there. And if we look at the scapular, put it on, we think of Our Lady, we will kind of a silent, unspoken prayer to her. We should, pray always. That's one way to do it. Then she sees that prayer. She sees that love and affection, that trust we have in her, and she rewards us. God rewards, Our Lady rewards, the saints reward us when we turn to them with devotion. And that's how the sacramentals can really protect us, is we use them devoutly.
That's right. I'm terrible at self-promotion, so I have to remember to do my promotion here before we move on. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, if you're watching the premiere of this, I'm here with Charles Frawnie. Sorry for the first few minutes of audio. I did fix that, though. I have my better microphone now, so don't hold me to it. And I'm going to Italy this fall. Speaking of a place of Catholic devotion, with Father Albert Callio, traditional Dominican. A traditional Dominican who can find one. Well, we did find one, and we're taking him to Italy with us. And seats are filling up, and some of the options have sold out. So check out the link in the description, or you can go to kennedyhall.ca/Italy. It's a pilgrimage of the shrines of Italy and the Amalfi Coast, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There's no such thing as an inexpensive trip to Europe, Charles, but there is such thing as a well-priced value. And I can say that about this. If you were to price it out without the group, you'd be spending at least double. So no, nothing is cheap. Of course, it's a trip to Europe. But if you're going to go to Europe, this is the way to go. We've got faithful guides at every location. This company's been in business for almost 30 years, so they know exactly who to use to guide Catholics through these places. It's very sensitive to our traditional Catholic beliefs, and so it's a wonderful thing. So check that out, ladies and gentlemen. Link in the description area or kennedyhall.ca/Italy. Okay. Now, there's so many, even just going through the table of contents, ladies and gentlemen, in this book, it's just striking to see some of the topics you have in here. And I do want to eventually get to where you have a chapter on COVID and demons, which I think is fascinating. I think that's very fascinating. But there's a lot of stuff in here that you probably have family members who are into these sorts of things. And we've talked about the Ouija board before. I think everyone's kind of talked about that. But one of the things is about spells and rituals. So when I narrated your book, the occult, or the rise of the occult. You had a footnote that some of the exorcists were not sort of conclusive on kind of how a spell works. But what is sort of the commonality of what exorcists have said about spells? Because, I mean, do people actually have magical powers, or is it power of suggestion or that sort of thing? Kind of what's behind that?
Yeah, so there is, in my research, I've been able to talk to a lot of exorcists. There are two groups I've come to realize. There are some that are very public and others that refuse to be public. And so in those two camps, sometimes you find different perspectives on spells and curses. Like the quiet exorcist, the non-public exorcist, sometimes think spells have much less power than other exorcists will say, and they'll lean on the power of suggestion. Now, the power of suggestion can be very powerful and could be an operative power within spells, because if the devil can strike fear in you, cause you to lose your faith, at the same time the devil's right there ready to operate against you, well, then a spell can essentially work, even though the witch did nothing. It was just the demon manipulating the witch to scare you and then cause you to lose faith, and now you're in a vulnerable spiritual state, and boom, you get attacked. And some people get possessed because of, absence of faith or pride. Father Ripperger talked about someone who got possessed because she was so proud. She thought she was better than other people. So spells can work that way. But then there are other people who see that essentially witches and Satanists, they have no power. Any spell they cast is them kind of making an agreement with a demon, and the demon then agrees. He's not going to promise anything. They're a bunch of liars, but agrees to go attack this person. And the demon's like, well, why not? I want to attack him anyway. Might as well do it. I've got this witch in mortal sin now because she asked me to do it. I'm going to go get this guy and see if I can mess with him. So the witch has no authority, or the Satanist has no authority to send these demons. The demons will do it, and then sometimes God will allow the demon to have a special moment to attack. And this is just, how God works. But we can be protected. This is why we need to be devout Catholics, state of grace, using the sacramentals, deep in a state of grace, not just, I went to confession recently, I don't think I've sinned. No, we need to nurture and let the state of grace flourish within us so that we're protected, not just from diabolical attacks through spells, but also through the manipulative culture, this occultic culture, so it doesn't get into our minds. So it's the demon that's doing it. It's not this mystical spell that has its own existence. It is a demon. The only power, the only activity, the only feet walking towards you, so to speak, though they have no bodies, are demons. And it's their manipulative power, their malice that is coming against you. Some exorcists say that spells can have more power if the witch increases her hatred for the person that she's sending this spell against. Now, if you look at that on the surface, you think, well, the witch has power. Like, no. Somehow, and exorcists will say there's so much more about this realm that they don't understand than that they do understand. So a lot of exorcists are saying what they've seen and what makes sense, but there's still so much mystery. So let's say the witch goes deeper into a state of mortal sin because of this added malice. Well, then the demon is extra pleased. He's like, all right, great. This is really working out. I'm going to let this witch see that she's, I'm at her beck and call. I'm going to go attack this guy double time. So she'll keep sinning. Because that's what demons are doing. As I talk about in The Rise of the Occult, they're manipulating the occultist all the time. They're working them over. They're baiting them like, hey, I'll give you these riches. I'll answer your request. But they never actually do. They just draw the occultist deeper into sin. So I think that's probably the best way, though there's more to say, on how spells are functioning. It's always a demon behind the scenes, but it also ties into our sin and their desire to make us sin more.
Well, and I think, even if it was just the power of suggestion, we should probably spend a couple minutes talking about how strong the power of suggestion is. I mean, we know from medical literature that the placebo effect works. I mean, it's whatever the numbers are, 10, 15, 20, 30% in different trials. People would be given a sugar pill and people are given the real pill. And a significant amount of the people given the sugar pill have the same effects as the people given the real pill. That's unbelievable. That's insane. And let's just say, well, it's funny. When I was in university, I took this very strange course. I was doing my French degree. And it was medieval French literature. It was very interesting, actually. A lot of stuff about le loup-garou, the werewolf folk tales of of France and Quebec, which are actually kind of fascinating. They're very Catholic stories because the wolf is kind of the representative of the lower passions and sin and so forth. It's kind of allegorical. But in any event, one of the movie, we had to watch this movie, which was like this retelling of this old French folktale. And I remember basically at the beginning, so this couple basically is going to get married. And just before they get married, these people basically dressed up as witches or something like that, kind of approach this man at midnight or something like that and spook him that he'll be unable to consummate the marriage and have children and so forth. And you actually see that the power of that stunt actually stops him from consummating his marriage. It's not graphic, it's part of the story. And, the marriage falls apart and all these kinds of things. It's kind of like a very Macbeth kind of theme. It's sort of the downfall of this guy. And, if you are someone who is open to the power of suggestion and something spooks you, because you get spooked by things, and you start to allow yourself to go down that dark place and sort of think, oh my goodness, they put a spell on me and like I have a toothache, and is that the thing? My knee is hurting, is that the thing, and so forth. Well, I mean, you could very likely get to the point where you think you have to go back to that person for the remedy. And then you will be making that conscious decision to do the demonic thing. So the spell has worked, even if it's just psychological. You are body, mind, and soul, and you can do things with your mind that will affect your soul. So I think, people can have their disagreements about the power of spells and how they work. But the fact is that there's a mechanism where even if it's not sort of magic, quote unquote, there is a reality where it can bring you down that dark path.
And it makes perfect sense to look at it this way too, because that's what the demons do against us. The primary attack that the demons wield against us is in our minds. They're suggesting thoughts. They're suggesting, hey, do this because of this. They're manipulating us. They're brainwashing us. Essentially, if we let them, they're a constant drip, constant reminder, don't forget about this, right? You should do this. Oh, God's lying. Remember with the temptation with Eve, like, what did he tell you? Let's talk about what God said, and let me help you understand what he said and didn't say, and then I'll get you to sin as a result, because I suggested these things to you. So the primary attack from the demons is psychological warfare. So if they can train, witches, warlocks, gurus, whoever, to manipulate people as well, like you said, they present essentially that the curse is there. They suggest it to you, and then they have the remedy. And then they draw you in as their disciple. You start to pay them, and so I think that makes perfect sense.
You know what? I just realized the occultists are like the government. We're gonna make up this climate scam, and then we're gonna tell you the only way to stop it is to give us your taxes. It's a story as old as time. They're like the same. Okay.
Yeah.
So okay. Now you talk in this book too about online witchcraft. And that really exploded during COVID, during the lockdown, when everything online. I think any YouTuber will tell you those were the glory days, my friends. The views that you got during those lockdown times, it's hard to recreate those. There's just more people were watching stuff.
Yeah, I bet.
But so what's that about? What's this online witchcraft stuff? Is it widespread? Is it TikTok? Is it Instagram? What's going on there?
Yeah. So, for example, some of the statistics, which I have in both books, there are witches out there who are YouTube witches who have 200,000 and 400,000 subscribers. Like, I have a YouTube channel. It's pretty sad. So go subscribe, Slaying Dragons Apostolate. Find me on YouTube. I only have like 1.5 thousand people, which is pretty good, but 200,000, 400,000 subscribers to these witches. And it's not, they didn't buy these subscribers, because I watched a lot of the videos from one of them to get an inside scoop. And they have this, I call her Lola in the book. I don't use her real name just to not drive, people with bad intentions towards her, but she has very engaged subscribers, all kinds of comments in the, underneath each video. And then you have, I think she said, and some exorcists said, and some of the former cultists said, that most covens now are online. So one of the families whose daughter, I can't remember if it was Ava in the book, let's just call her Ava in the book. You can find her. Her life was pretty much destroyed. I don't know if she's ever recovered. I think she's almost come back after like a 10-year descent into into the occult, but she'll stay up at night on her phone. The mom was like, it's the phones. The phones are the problem, because she'll stay up all night vaping in her room and chatting with people in these witch forums who are her friends. And the mom's like, these aren't your friends. You don't know them. They don't care about you. But she can tap into all of this stuff online. And then another, one of the most experienced occultists, former occultists that I interviewed, John is his pseudonym, he said, what you used to have to go through initiations and training and find like a master and be the apprentice to learn these occultic arts, but now it's all online. Everything is online. You can learn the deepest, darkest rituals. Just you click, 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 there it is, and I'm going to summon this demon. And way back when, before the internet, these rituals were not available. The names of these demons were not publicly known. You couldn't access them, but now it's just all there. And people are jumping in. He said now, like when a kid goes astray, when a youth, gets tempted from a Catholic family when they're off at college, and it's not a quick escape into occultism. You come back. It's a deep dive, and you get lost, and you don't come back because the darkness is so powerful right now once you go into it. So you have, and you have apps on your phone. Speaking of online, I guess that counts as online. There are these ghost hunting apps. I have a whole chapter in the Occult Among Us about it. A former occultist told me about it, and an exorcist told me about it. I'm like, what are you talking about? Ghost hunting apps? But people use them like Ouija boards to summon spirits. And I looked at all these products, a whole bunch of them, and extracted a lot of the reviews, and they're very revealing. Like, people are having demonic encounters through their phone. And one of the guys I talked to, interviewed in person, he's like, you say things into him and you get intelligent responses. And he's like, wow, even if it was fake, let's go back to the psychological issue. Even if it's fake, if your intention is to talk to a spirit, talk to a demon's going to respond. Even if he's not responding through that app, he's going to come to you because you have opened yourself up. Now, God hopefully will block the demon, but there's a high chance that a demon is going to respond if God lets him. Say like the Ouija board. I mean, a Ouija board causes a lot of problems, but a lot of the times God blocks the demon from responding or from latching onto you, or he allows you to be scared. You never touch it again, and you're okay. So you have these covens online. You have TikTok. I mean, Witch Talk is a thing. Hashtag Witch Talk. The number of views are insane. Let's see, I'm looking down my notes. There were 19 billion views in 2021 of hashtag Witch Talk. And in 2023, there were 44 billion views of this Witch Talk hashtag. I don't even know how TikTok works, but that sounds really bad. So people are there are forums that witches go onto to discuss how to be a witch and what to watch out for and what's good. There are all these online things. So it's really bad. And that's where COVID. So eventually we can tie into COVID and the demonic, whatever the title was. But when people were lost, or when society shut down and people had the online world only, like, this is where things really exploded, really got bad. Got bad for the occultic, and it got good for people who were making, doing YouTube things like you were saying.
Well, it's a double-edged sword, because so many people were catechized to traditional Catholicism during the COVID time because of the fact that they were just looking for answers, and they were finding these communities of faithful Catholics, sharing sermons and so forth, and that was great. But of course, the flip side is going to happen as well. It's funny. I've only ever looked on TikTok one time when I was trying to do research on some priest thing, and I never did again. I don't have the app, and it's one of those things. Chesterton said there's no such thing as bad things, just bad uses of things, and he's correct. Obviously, all created things, because they exist, are kept in existence by God, and therefore there's a good inherent to the fact that they exist, and rather than they don't exist. But I look at TikTok like one of those things. People say, Kennedy, you should put some videos on TikTok. You get crazy views. And I'm like, I don't even ever want to be on there. I don't know. It just seems like a hellhole. So it makes sense that witches would be on there, because that place is just disastrous. Okay, let's get into this. This is, I'm actually going to put this in the title of the show, because I think, speaking of views, I think people will be interested. You have a chapter here. You talk about yoga and Reiki and things like that. Excuse me. And those are definitely, some false spiritual practices. But COVID and demons, I'm going to give you my thought on COVID and demons, what that has to do with each other. And then I want to give me your breakdown of what you kind of came up with. So I actually wrote a book called Lockdown with the Devil. And it's an homage to the Screwtape Letters style of writing, if you've ever read the Screwtape Letters to the viewers and listeners. And as soon as COVID started and the lockdowns and all the communism and everything, I realized to myself, this was fertile breeding ground for demonic destruction of the family, because families are so broken. And they kind of, the secular family that sort of somehow stays together, they do so today almost because they're all just busy. It's like, they've all got their major vices and they've got disorder, but the kids are in the sports, the kids are in the school, the kids in the play, the mom's on the thing, the dad's working this hours, whatever. They spend maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours maximum a day awake together, if you think about it, between getting up and getting ready to go out the door, getting the school bus, get home, do the sports practice, whatever, dinner, if they eat together is whatever. They see each other for 45 minutes before bed and they watch Netflix, they go to sleep. And during COVID, everyone was forced to come home together. So that was kind of the setting for the story. And I thought it was very effective, because you have these moms and dads together that really don't like each other, or they used to, but they've got problems. You got these kids who are just online the whole time. And I kind of used that as the ground for the story. And I realized, man, oh man, that would be a time to totally destroy the family. And there were a huge amount of divorces and things that happened during COVID as a result. So what's your connection with COVID and demons in this book?
One of I put as like a headline at the top of the chapter from one of the exorcists. He said, "I could not dream up a scenario that would be this damaging," talking about what happened with COVID. So churches were closed, schools were closed, businesses were closed. The internet became the real world for the majority of the population of the entire planet. And then the youth became isolated and depressed. People left distrustful and confused regarding their sources for news. This is all from the intro paragraph of what happened as a result of COVID. I mean, the whole world shut down. Like, that's not normal. That's antichrist kind of stuff. And every government in the whole world had totalitarian power all of a sudden. Like, who sent that memo out? Where did they all learn this? And then there were suspicions from people, from exorcists, though just suspicions that there was some kind of diabolical principle even behind the virus itself. But the reason was not just from the fruits. When I talk about COVID in this chapter, I'm not referring just to the virus, but primarily to the world and the church's response to the virus, what they were willing to do. One of the things, like holy water, this is a clear sign of the diabolical behind it. Holy water became viewed as poisonous. There could be COVID in there. We got to get rid of all the holy water. Somebody's dirty hands went in there. It could be poison. Don't touch the holy water. Don't touch the holy water. The holy water is one of the sacramentals that the church instituted to cure us of diseases, to heal us from things, and to drive demons away. And we label it as evil. This is a clear diabolical red flag, just that one little thing. And you see people left the church and never came back. There have been articles in the past couple of years about the church parishes trying to recover their population because people never came back. And what it did was it proved people had no faith at all already. So when the churches closed, like, well, whatever. Apparently I didn't really care about it anyway. I'm not really interested in going back. But there was one, I talk about it in chapters 3 through 5 in The Rise of the Occult, but the Pachamama issue. So one of the reasons why people were like, what was it? The same quote I had at the beginning. Before he said, "I could not dream up a scenario that would be this damaging," he said, "It was very much like a chastisement, what the world and the church went through because of COVID." Now, this happened right after Pachamama. Pachamama was early October 2019, days after I published my first big book, Slaying Dragons. I published this on the Feast of St. Michael the Archangel 2019. Days after it, I was clueless. Days after it, the Pachamama thing happened. And like, oh, that's very interesting. And as a result of that, 4 exorcists spoke publicly, warning the world that something the diabolical was handed power, not authority, but power, because of our sins, because of the church's sin, because of the world's sin, because of the indifference. The demon got extra ability to act. And then, as I talk about in this, exorcists use mystics often, people with certain spiritual gifts, pretty much always tied to being able to see the spiritual realm in a certain way. And we know that this is possible, but these people have been vetted by the church and are reasonable, devout people, and they use this gift just for the service of the church. And often they suffer a lot, which is a good sign that it's a real gift. Their lives don't improve necessarily on the financial or the physical. But these mystics, one of them was hearing demons speak a lot. That was one of the gifts. Often, again, it's a burden to be able to do this. But she described it as like the diabolical chatter. And the chatter was saying that the demons were up to something. Exorcists were talking amongst themselves like something weird is happening. The demons seem to be up to something. However they figure that out, in their prudence, they've figured it out. And then Pachamama happened. And then they issued this warning. And then COVID came. And one of these mystics told this team of exorcists, like, that was it. This is it. COVID is what the demons were getting all excited about. And you could see she's probably right, because the whole world and the church shut down and holy water became poisonous. I mean, the signs are clear. And then some people reached out to me, thankfully they could, to share that they had seen firsthand priest chaplains praying over people, minor deliverance prayers in the hospital who had COVID, and were healing real fast. We're recovering much, much faster than anybody else and getting out of the hospital. So that raised the question, like, is this somehow tied to a chastisement? And then thus the church's intercession through her sacramentals can relieve people of the burden of this virus. So there was a lot, and it's a short chapter, but there's a lot in there.
That's awesome. And that's going to lead me into my last question. We're coming around 40 minutes here. We'll go 45 to an hour, but I want to just say a couple of comments on that. I am not a mystic. I will never pretend to be a mystic. If Kennedy Hall ever comes on YouTube talking about a prophecy he had, please call a doctor, because I've lost my ever-loving mind. Okay, actually, please call my priests and then tell them to instruct my friends in the Holy Name Society to take me back around the woodshed and beat some sense into me, because I've lost it. But we're Catholics, and we have intuition and things like that. And I remember when the Pachamama thing happened, I kept saying to my friends and my wife, and I'm just going off of the logic of Scripture. You know, one thing recently with this Republican National Convention, everyone is freaking out because there's been a squishy now sort of softening on the abortion position. That's obviously egregious. But I did a post yesterday and I said, ladies and gentlemen, the worst sin in the Old Testament is idolatry, because it's the 10 Commandments. The worst sin is false religion. And this is why the empires of the Old Testament fall. This is why the Davidic kingdom collapses. The Davidic kingdom does not collapse because David kills his friend because he wants to sleep with his wife. The Davidic kingdom falls because Solomon, who is the wisest man in the world, brings false gods into the temple. That's why it falls. God knows that we're sinners. God will not pull his hand back from a country because there's murder in the country and abortion is a type of homicide. God will not pull his hand back. Again, this is not me saying it's good. What I'm trying to say is there's an even deeper sin. The deeper sin is the religious liberty. The deeper sin is the religious freedom, where we equate the devil and Christ as if they have the same rights in the society, which is to say error has rights, which is impossible. And that's the deep sickness that is at the heart of the problems that plague Western civilization. It's at the heart of liberalism. Abortion is obviously is evil, but the way that the 10 Commandments work, it's the first 3 sins are against idolatry, blaspheme, and false worship. That's the first 3 sins, and they're in hierarchical order. And then after that is actually authority, which is honor your father and your mother, because a revolt against authority is a revolt against God. Now, there's a caveat there. You can have just rebellion and resistance against tyranny. The church understands that. But as a principle, and then under that is murder, which is interesting to think about, because those are spiritual sins. That's the point. And I remember saying to my wife and my friends, I said, we just had false idols enthroned in St. Peter's. You know, I didn't predict COVID or anything like that, but I said, we will not get out of this alive. I just said, there will be something, there will be something that's going to happen, because we just cannot continue this way. We cannot enthrone a demon, an idol of a demon in the Vatican and then think that things are going to be fine. There will be some sort of punishment for this. And then lo and behold, 6 months later, we have this COVID thing that starts, and it took me a bit, but I said, this has to have something to do with that. So you're exactly right. You're exactly correct that we don't have to waste 75 hours on Rumble and YouTube looking at lab leaks and things like that. Okay, that's important in the natural sphere. But what's really important is that this is the basic understanding of the Bible, that is at the beginning. With sin enters disease and death. With sin enters disease and death. And you're so right. You're so right, Charles. Thank you for bringing that up about the sacramentals. One of the things that happens with last rites, when people receive the sacrament of last rites, often they'll experience a healing. And that's not the primary purpose, because obviously it's to prepare the person for death, but because it is the power of the church, and the church restores us to the state of justice. And in the state of justice with Adam and Eve before the fall, there is no disease. And so we should expect these things to happen. And in the traditional ritual for blessing of holy water, for exorcism of holy water, it's very explicit that the uses in there include a defense against pestilence. And the fact that they were saying no holy water, it's just like, what are you guys doing? I mean, it showed that there was no faith. There was no faith. There was no faith amongst the hierarchy. I mean, obviously there's individuals, but as a whole, there was no faith in the power of the church. So that brings me to my next thing, though, because you mentioned that sometimes exorcists will work with what they often call sensitives, right? People that have this sort of, and you're so correct that they have to be vetted by the proper people. And one good sign is that their life isn't made better by these spiritual gifts. It's like the anti-Medjugorje. In the Medjugorje, they see the Madonna, so to speak, and they get rich. Whereas this, it's like, no, they see the Virgin Mary and then they get in a car crash. Not that we're wanting these things to happen, but it's God is going to keep the real mystics humble because he knows the dangers of this. And St. John of the Cross is so clear on this. So you talk about, I'm looking at the book here. Which chapter is it? It is, chapter 22, spiritual gifts in the occult. I'm writing on the charismatic renewal. Just like you, I'm making so many friends talking about these things you're not supposed to talk about. And there's a very big difference. So the devil can feign miracles. This is in the Bible. This is Simon Magus that St. Paul talks about. There are such things as demonic prophecies. The devil has, I always say, he's like, like stockbrokers or poker players who are basically able to predict the markets or the next hand because of their above average understanding and intelligence of the odds. The devil has that, times a zillion. And therefore he can, in a sense, predict the future, even though he's not really, but he's predicting it beyond reasonable doubt. This can happen with people in the occult. So why don't you go into sort of this idea of the spiritual gifts in the occult?
Yeah, it really ties into a lot of things. The occult is a mockery, a counterfeit of the one true faith. Our Lord wants to give us all these gifts, spiritual gifts, sacramental gifts, the sacraments, both internal, external. But in the occult, people want power. They want divinity, self-initiated, self-originating divinity. They want to be superior to others. They want to exert their will on the world. They want to be the cause of the change in their life. They want to be autonomous. They want to be godlike. So the occult gifts are corrupted and corrupting, but they're often mockeries of the one true faith because, like the devil, take levitation. Levitation is a classic sign of a saint, but a demon can do it. I think it's St. Thomas who says the mechanism behind levitation, so to speak, is an angel. The angel is picking up the saint in the actual operation of how it's functioning. But a demon can also pick up an occultist. And I think there's a prophecy from, who is it? One of the doctors of the church, just completely jumped out of my head, who said that the Antichrist will be levitated up into the air as a sign of his divinity, like after his fake resurrection. And then St. Michael will then smack him out of the sky. And that'll be the end of the Antichrist. I can't remember who it was. St. Robert Bellarmine comes to mind. But so there's the levitation. But you also have these gifts, let's see, where are we? Like I said, one of the things that the exorcists utilize are people who are able to see demons, what they're doing, where they are, how many they are, They can see the wounds in people that demons are latching onto. So all these good things that can be then used to help the exorcist heal the person. But I'm trying to remember where it is. One of the criticisms that came up about occultic gifts. Well, there are actually some very interesting things. So this chapter is kind of complicated. One of the theories is that some of the gifts that people have are leftovers from the fall. I'm not sure if you've ever heard this concept before, but prelapsarian gifts. So we had all these preternatural gifts. Adam and Eve did, not we. They were the only ones. They lost it all at the fall. But there's one theory, and apparently it's pretty prominent in the church. It's not official, that some of these gifts linger, and some people can have them. And it could be the gift of, being able to read people, whatever that means, or knowing where things are in the world. It's kind of an infused knowledge. It's still mysterious. There's a book I reference in here if people want to know more about it. I think Sophia sells it. Monsignor Rossetti has mentioned it. It's called Occult Phenomena in the Light of Theology. It's by an abbot, Alois Weisinger. So if these then are natural gifts, so you have this natural ability, and the demons can mess with these. So when it comes to people with occultic gifts, these are either operations of the devil trying to pretend that you have this power, but you don't because it's him, or it's a natural gift that you have, being able to read people, read souls, being an empath, as they talk about, and the devil manipulates that. So in one family, this is very interesting, Ava's family, Ava is the kid in the occult. The mom, who's very grounded, very prudent, and very holy, has a spiritual gift where she can read people. She doesn't know where it came from. She's had it all the time, and she doesn't use it for anything. But her daughter has that same gift, apparently, and uses it to make money. Combines it with being a life coach and makes money off of it, which is a clear sign, as we were talking, that you're probably misusing this gift. But she said it's so uncanny that people she does these readings for, whatever readings really mean, are just blown away with the accuracy of Ava's ability to understand them, even though it's done over the camera like this for someone that she doesn't even know. So one of the things, Father Thomas talks about, people with these gifts who discern gifts or given gifts are tempted to make themselves a magisterium. They're tempted to interpret the gifts themselves and not submit them to the church, which we talked about is critical for the exorcist. So people want to they make their own religion. They make their own rules, and sometimes they can become proud as a result, and that's going to fall into the hands of the devil. So Monsignor Rossetti, I can't remember exactly what he said when he read the book and gave his endorsement. He said he really liked the chapter on the gifts because this is something that's not being talked about enough, and he thought this was a good kind of like first step in this conversation about spiritual gifts, what they could be, how to use them, what the occult is doing with them, and helping us discern them.
That's so good. I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm going to have to plagiarize / cite your work and give you the credit for it when I do my my charismatic book, because I'm going to be talking about the true charismatic gifts. And, not going to make it. I've already lost a lot of these friends, but in the renewal today, a lot of people talking about gifts, but I'm sorry, 99.99999 times out of 100, there is no vetting of this. I mean, yeah, they'll say, the priest really liked his, as into this. And it's like, well, that's not how it works. I mean, it's, we look at Padre Pio as a perfect example. Padre Pio, people like to use him as an example of obedience, and that's obviously true, but he was a professed religious who took vows. So we have different types of obedience in different spheres. I mean, that should be reasonable enough for people to understand. But nonetheless, when the Padre Pio phenomenon was taken off, they sent him away to basically go live a life of prayer for about 20 years. And that was very smart. Why? Because it could have been the devil. We obviously know with Padre Pio it wasn't, but it could have been. Mm-hmm. And that is how the church has looked at these very gifted souls. St. John of the Cross is very clear on you should never desire these gifts. You should never ask for these gifts. Mm-hmm. And he says, even if you're presented with them, you should never use them. And if you are supposed to, God will make it very clear to you. And it's almost like a test. It's like, okay, you resisted this. I know you don't want this for your own personal gain. And, at that point, we see these great saints, they enter in these ecstasies and things like that and have prophecies. But it's after a long time of spiritual formation, asceticism, mortification, the mortification of the will through obedience to their superior and so forth, where they break themselves down where now it's like the scripture says, where it's no longer me, but Christ, no longer I that lives, but Christ who lives in me. Then someone is at the point for that. And the occult world and much of these funny phenomena of spirituality happening in the church is the opposite. I went to a conference, I got slain in the spirit. Praise God, I got the gift of tongues. It's like, that's not how this works. I mean, you got to be careful because, you're playing with fire. So, all right, Charles, there's more we could say, but we can't give away too much because people got to read the book. So I'll just bring it up on the screen here, and then I'm going to play 2 or 3 minutes of maybe a minute and a half of the audiobook that I narrated for you last year. People can check that out as well. So I'll just bring it up on the screen here, make sure I have the right tab open. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen. This is The Occult Among Us. Really good book, really important book. Oops, opened the wrong thing there. Sorry. Wrong program. Oopsie daisy. Opening up there you go. Really, really good book. Check it out. It's on Amazon. All of Charles's books have, by the way, my son's named Charles. You know that, right?
Oh yeah, that's right.
My new
Good
son. He's Charles Marcel Emmanuel Hall. We joke, he sounds like he has the name of a king or something, so we jokingly call him Charles Marcel Emmanuel III, even though there is no one before that, but we just joke around. But so check out this book here on Amazon. Also, you can go to Charles's website, excuse me, slayingdragonspress.com. All of his work is there. Lots of great stuff. And the thing I love about Charles's stuff, and this is why I choose to work with Charles, is because he's tackling these issues, but you can tell just by the selections of the things he has here. He has St. Alphonsus Liguori, Christian Rule of Life. He has practical steps for holiness, okay? You can tell, talking about how to make a retreat, sanctifying pregnancy. This man is not in this to make a buck. He's in this to do the Lord's work in the real sense, and he's got the constitution to be able to do these things. So I'm really thankful for your work, Charles, and I want everyone to go to his website. And I want so many people to go to his website that it crashes. Not actually, but that because, it's going to get lots of traffic. And we're just going to listen here quick to just a couple minutes here of The Rise of the Occult. So if you're into audiobooks, you can listen to the book that I narrated. So I'm just going to bring that up on the screen here. And let's just take a quick listen. Is on full display today in our very broken world, and in particular within the scourge of the occult, which calls out to wounded souls and feeds on their brokenness. We are all, therefore, in the sights of the diabolical, which seeks to draw every one of us away from God and the right worship which will fulfill our souls. It is not simply through the sins which we commit ourselves, which do in fact create an emptiness and a wound, that the diabolical will seek to ensnare us. It is also from the effects of this fallen world, the discord within mankind, the separation we feel between ourselves and God, between ourselves and others, between ourselves and the created world, and the internal discord which burdens us on a daily basis. So you can check that out. That's just a quick preview. It's available where all audiobooks are available. We use the Findaway Voices upload, so you can actually listen on Spotify. And just so you know, people, if you have a Spotify membership, if you listen to 30% of the book, the author actually gets the royalties as if you listen to the whole book. So you got to support these independent traditional writers, because Charles and I are in a similar boat. I've got some books with publishers, but there's a reason why I'm coming out with my book on the charismatic renewal independently later this year, because I get messages all the time from people who work for publishers and universities and things saying, "Thank you for this. I wish we could publish this, but we just can't. But someone needs to." Because I get it. You got to be a free agent sometimes to be able to get that information out there. And Charles is one of the soldiers out there in the battlefield. So congratulations for your work. Is there anything else, Charles, you want to promote before we sign off here?
Well, just the website, slayingdragonspress.com, my YouTube channel, the Slaying Dragons Apostolate. Just find me there, subscribe. I need to boost the subscribers. I'm trying to get monetized eventually. This is a kind of a small publishing enterprise in a world. My wife told me the other day, this is the worst time to start a business or have a small business because of inflation. So support, any kind of support for the book, for the work I'm doing, for your prayers, buying directly from me. I'm happy to sign books. I get more royalty there. Spread the word, tell your priests. I'm also trying to push the Spanish edition of Slaying Dragons. It's a great translation. People really like it, but it's hard to sell. Matando Dragones. You can find it on my website, on Amazon, everywhere. It's the Spanish edition of Slaying Dragons. That'd be a good one to help. If you want to help me right now, try to help push this book to get the word out.
Love it. Go to his website, ladies and gentlemen. Click all the links. It'll be all there underneath my show. It'll be the top thing. If you just click the description area, if you're on YouTube or listening on podcast platform, it'll say, Charles's books in caps lock, and then just click those links and it's all there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another edition of Mere Tradition, and I will see you soon. And Charles, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks again.